Welcome back, you two, to another episode of Odd Topic. What do you know about banks?
But the law says if you made a mistake, you rescind.
Whose law says that? The law of the United States?
Yeah.
Or who controls the law of the United States?
Legislatures.
Yeah, legislators that have their whole own agenda. Laws mean nothing. You give me the currency of a country and you can make all the rules in the world. And that's all that matters. Who's in control?
Around 2000 BC, you see a form of banking where prototype banks lent grains to farmers and traders who transported the goods between cities. The lenders were based in temples and later added two important additions. They accepted deposits and they began to exchange money. Now, the origins of modern banking can be traced to medieval and early Renaissance Italy to rich cities. Now, the Italian Renaissance was the transition from medieval Dark Ages to the early modern Europe. Renaissance in Italian means rebirth. This was actually a large change in culture starting around the 14th century. Now, by the late 15th century, Italy became recognized as the European leader in Renaissance arts, architecture, music, literature, science, and philosophy. During that time, there was a problem in Italian politics. Most of Italy was being broken up by major European powers. Could this actually be the wealthy bank owners or private banks? Now, the Renaissance began in Tuscany and spread to Venice. It had a large impact or effect on Rome. By the 16th century, it peaked and foreign invasions put the region into chaos behind what was known as the Italian Wars, which were wars for power and territory.
Have no limit to the amount of money they can create and the wealth that they can create for themselves. Money's the bloodline of a civilized society.
The Bardi and the Peruzzi family dominated banking in the 14th century Florence, growing branches throughout Europe. Now, in 1407, the earliest known state deposit bank sprouted up. This was the Banco di San Giorgio, or the Bank of St. George. Now, this bank was to consolidate debt, which had gotten out of hand from the war with Venice for trading and financial dominance. They did this by facilitating management of San Giorgio's shares. It gets fishy when you look into the families involved in the establishment and governing of the bank. You had the House of Grimaldi and Serra, but they made an odd move and added a number of Jewish agents.
Yes, you know what? There are a lot of Jews in Hollywood. Yes, there are a lot of Jews in high finance, a lot of Jews in banking. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, all of the intelligent Christians and Muslims from the fall of the Roman Empire onwards pretty much did not allow lending for profits, right? Did not allow people to charge interest on money they lent out, right? It was called usury. It was considered a sin. And so they outsourced financial management and banking and all of that kind of stuff to Jews. I mean, there were other groups, but primarily it was Jews.
So let's move up to modern banking of the 17th and the 18th century. Moving from trading, the U.S. began to use gold and silver coins called specie as legal tender. Merchants began to store gold with Goldsmiths of London, who owned vaults and charged a fee to use the vaults. For each deposit, the goldsmith issued a receipt, for the amount and purity of the metals which were stored. This gradually moved to Goldsmiths lending out money on behalf of the depositor, which was an early form of fractional reserve banking. By issuing promissory notes, which were promises to pay the depositor, Goldsmiths could loan with small to no risk. This put Goldsmiths in the lead in banking and led to creating new money based on a credit system.
Where was I? So you see, by the time he got to you, Pyle, his bank was out of money.
But he gave me lots of money and charged me a lot of interest.
Yes, that's the only way banks make money, by making debt loans. Debt equals money, Pyle. Remember that. Debt equals money. The more loans they make, the more money they make.
But if they don't have any money, then where did my money come from?
You're gonna want to take a step back, Pyle.
By 1695, the Bank of England began the issuing of the first permanent banknotes.
Wait a second, Herman. I just thought of something. If I got this money from the bank, and the bank got it from the Federal Reserve dump trucks, then where does the Federal Reserve get that money? Say, Herman, why am I wearing a burglar bikini top?
Because no one is allowed inside the Fed. Not you, not me, no American citizen, no duly elected member of our Congress, not the Supreme Court.
Not the Supreme Court?
Not the Supreme Court, not the Justice Department, not the CIA, DIA, FBI, ATF, ATE, NBC, not even GOT.
How come the government isn't allowed inside its own building?
Government. The Fed is a private bank owned by private stockholders. Do not let the name Federal fool you. This place is about as federal as Federal Express.
A private bank? But private?
Now, the Rothschilds pioneered international finance on a large scale.
Private bankers are nothing if not dedicated to their schemes to acquire other people's wealth, and they knew full well how easy it is to corrupt a nation's leaders. Now, just 1 year after Mayor Amschel Rothschild had uttered his infamous, "Let me issue and control the nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws," private bankers succeeded in setting up a new private central bank called the First Bank of the United States, largely through the efforts of the Rothschilds' chief supporter in the United States, Alexander Hamilton. Now, this First Bank of the United States was founded in 1791, and by the end of its 20-year charter, the First Bank of the United States had almost ruined the nation's economy while enriching the bank's owners. As a result, Congress refused to renew the charter and signaled their intention to go back to a state-issued, value-based currency on which the people paid no interest at all to any banker. This resulted in a threat from Nathan Mayer Rothschild against the U.S. government. Quote, "Either the application for renewal of the charter is granted, or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war."
So when the bankers don't get their way, there seems to be some type of war or assassination. Let's keep going.
Congress still refused to renew the charter for the First Bank of the United States, whereupon Nathan Mayer Rothschild railed, quote, "Teach those impudent Americans a lesson. Bring them back to colonial status," end quote. Financed by the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Britain then launched the War of 1812 to recolonize the United States and force them back into the slavery of the Bank of England's banknotes, or to plunge the United States into so much debt they would be forced to accept a new private central bank. And the plan worked. Plunged into debt, unemployment, poverty by the predations of the private central bank, and in 1832, Andrew Jackson successfully campaigned for his second term as president under the slogan, "Jackson and no bank." True to his word, Jackson succeeded in blocking the renewal of the charter for the Second Bank of the United States of America. And this was where that famous quote came from Andrew Jackson. Quote, "Gentlemen, I too have been a close observer of the doings of the Bank of the United States. I have had men watching you for a long time, and I am convinced that you've used the funds of the banks to speculate in the breadstuffs of the country. When you won, you divided the profits amongst you, and when you lost, you charged it to the bank. You tell me that if I take the deposits from the bank and annul the charter, I shall ruin 10,000 families. That may be true, gentlemen, but that is your sin. Should I let you go on, you will ruin 50,000 families, and that would be my sin. You are a den of vipers and thieves. I've determined to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out." End quote. Andrew Jackson. Shortly after the charter for the Second Bank of the United States expired, there was an assassination attempt on Andrew Jackson, and it failed when both pistols used by the assassin, Richard Lawrence, failed to fire. Later on, Lawrence explained the motive for the assassination by saying that with President Jackson dead, money would be more plenty. So it was an assassination motivated by the interests of the bankers. So it should probably be no surprise that the financial dimension of the Civil War are not well known to the average American. It's portrayed in our history books and our popular media as an internal dispute over slavery, but in fact it was a war with global implications. When the Confederacy seceded from the United States, the bankers once again saw the opportunity for a rich harvest of debt and offered to fund Lincoln's efforts to bring the South back into the Union at 30% interest. Lincoln remarked that he would not free the black man by enslaving the white man to the bankers, and using his authority as president, issued a new government currency, the greenback. This was a direct threat to the wealth and power of the central bankers, who quickly responded. This is a quote from the London Times following Lincoln's issuance of the greenbacks. Quote, "If this mischievous financial policy, which has its origin in North America, shall become indurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous without precedent in the history of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That country must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe." So, goaded by the private bankers, much of Europe supported the Confederacy against the Union, with the expectation that victory over Lincoln would mean the end of the greenback. France and Britain seriously considered an outright invasion on the United States in support of the Confederacy, but they were held at bay by Russia. A little bit of history most Americans don't understand. Russia came to the aid of Lincoln's Union during this crisis. Now, at that time, Russia had just ended their serfdom system, and they had a state central bank similar to the system the United States had been founded on. Now, free of European intervention, the Union won the war, and Lincoln announced his intention to go on issuing the greenbacks. Following Lincoln's assassination, the greenbacks were pulled from circulation, and the American people forced to go back to an economy based on banknotes borrowed at interest from the private bankers. So finally, in 1913, the private central bankers of Europe, in particular the Rothschilds of Great Britain, the Warburgs of Germany, met with their American financial collaborators on Jekyll Island, Georgia, to form a new banking cartel with the express purpose of forming the third bank of the United States, with the aim of placing complete control of the United States money supply once again under the control of private bankers. Owing to hostility over the previous banks of the United States, the name of this third bank was changed to the Federal Reserve.
This is Ethan, Federal Reserve.
Hey, Bill here, First National.
Hi there, Bill. How are you?
Good. We're running a little low on money.
No problem. How much you need?
Oh, how does 20 million sound? What?
Excellent. We'll ship it over first thing tomorrow.
Wait, he can just call up the Fed and ask for more money and they give him whatever they want?
No, pal. The Fed don't give the banks money. The Fed loans the banks money. The banks have to pay it back with interest. Now, come on, time to go.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy understood the predatory nature of private central banking. He understood why Andrew Jackson fought so hard to end the Second Bank of the United States. So Kennedy wrote and signed Executive Order 11110, which ordered the U.S. Treasury to issue a new public currency called the United States Note. Now, Kennedy's United States notes were not borrowed from the Federal Reserve. They were created by the U.S. government and backed by the silver stockpiles held by the U.S. government. It represented a return to the system of economics the United States had been founded on, and it was perfectly legal for Kennedy to do so under the Constitution. All told, some $4.5 billion went into the public circulation, which eroded interest payments to the Federal Reserve and loosened their control over the nation. 5 months after signing Executive Order 11110, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and the United States notes pulled from circulation and destroyed.
A vicious cycle of wars and assassinations to manipulate a country into their strongholds of financial debt. So ask yourselves, where are we in this cycle today?
One of the key movers and shakers of this, let's get a central bank by making the people afraid by causing their banks to collapse. One of the key movers and shakers was a man by the name of, you might recognize it, J.P. Morgan. His father was an agent for the wealthy, you might know this name, Rothschild family. Here's what your Bible says, Exodus 22:25. If you lend money to any of my people that are poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury, neither shall you lay upon him interest. Leviticus 25:36 and 37. Take thou no interest of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee, that thou shalt not give him the money by interest, nor lend him thy victuals for increase.
Topic. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, baby.